Good
Can you
morning.
hear me? Oh, that was quick. I was just sharing everything and here we are.
Here we are. Welcome. So hi, everyone. And Eddie, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
So, of course, this morning we're delighted to be taking a virtual tour of Eddie's space in connection with the project A Room with a View. And we're going to be focusing on Mooney Mooney Underpass, which is a new work that Eddie's created especially for the project. And just before we get started, we would just like to respectfully acknowledge and pay our respects to the sovereign custodians of this land upon which we live and work each day, the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation. This is their land. Sovereignty has never been ceded. And we pay our respects to the elders, the land, as Eddie says beautifully in her statement, and its sound.
Sounds, yes. The places that make these sounds.
Yeah, and we extend that respect to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders from all different communities. So thank you very much. And there might just be some of us who are a bit less familiar with the project. And so I was just going to spend 1 or 2 minutes just having a quick run through to explain the concept. It's of course an art exhibition about everyday being and ritual, and it features contemporary works of photography, drawing, moving image, literature and design by leading female creatives, examining the creative impulse and the role of the home in shaping and nurturing our sense of self, especially in times of hardship. So the project engages 6 female creatives across 2 stages. The first part engages with our visual artists, of course, Eddie, and along with Ali McCann and Jo Lane. And in part 2, which we're actually still fundraising for at the moment, we aim to produce a beautiful book, which will be designed by Carolyn Ang, and that will feature 3 new works by the artists, along with, we hope, an original piece of writing by the wonderful writer Julie Coe. Finally, in the new year, we're aiming to gather our women together to exhibit and to partake in a conversational series. And the ultimate aim is to, well, after we've paid our creatives, is to be in a position to donate our book sales proceeds to Domestic Violence Victoria. And that gesture is really an acknowledgement of the women who are and have been at risk of domestic violence in the home always, but more so during the pandemic. And also an acknowledgement of the social disadvantages that women continue to face in the workplace, which makes them more susceptible during times of hardship. So there's some more details on the website about how you can get involved and support if you want to via our chuff.org campaign. But today is really about Eddie and her beautiful work. So I want to get straight to that. I should say up front that the starting point for these works that each of the artists are making for part 2 of the project come from this idea of exploring the home or the studio at home during the period of isolation that we found ourselves. So they're not intended to be literal studio visits, of course. They're, of course, intended to be poetic representations of the home or the studio in the format of short video works, typically as a way of exploring the everyday, along with creative process and our sense of self. Each artist was allowed 20 minutes, so that was the main parameter, to share their space or an impression of it, along with insights into their process or a particular work of their choosing. And the only other restriction was that we use iPhones and that they, of course, work within that 20-minute time frame. So many wonderful things have come out of that. And so I just want to begin, Eddie, thanks again for being here. There's a lot to talk about in this work. But I want to start with your perspectives. Could you tell us a little bit about Mooney Mooney Underpass, what you were seeking to explore with the work?
Well, I'll just wind it back a little, if you don't mind. But because it's such a sort of trajectory, especially also with meeting you and everything. But this is actually, funnily enough, is actually my studio, which is the corner of my share house room with my partner. So here on this place, the project and the recordings sort of all came together. Yeah. And obviously, yes, in my own words, I'll just say that were made on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, and they will infinitely and always be the owners of these places. And it's a lot of my work has been focused around these in-between places, sort of focusing on value of place and the differences between colonizer perspectives of the value of place, and those that sort of intrinsically belong here and are the ultimate custodians, whereas we are sort of different in our views of ownership. So Mooney Mooney in itself was one of these kind of incidental crossovers. So a lot of my work is really based within an improvised context. So things just will, I trust that things will always happen as long as I'm sort of listening, or and that's hopefully what my work encourages, and others as well, in terms of place and the sounds that these amazing places make. And in between spaces for me are these different zones. And through the lockdown, it was like that. We were going on these walks within our 5 kilometre radius. This one was pretty close to the edge, but just noticing, during this time that everything's slowed down, its focus has shifted. We're less productivity based, all these sort of colonizer kind of capitalist trajectories that we're always on. Mm-hmm. And so going on these bike rides and these walks that we were doing, came across this certain space, and it caught my attention, and it's caught quite a few people's attention. Actually, friends of mine have also written on the when I've shared this work, been like, oh yeah, I've been under there, I know what you mean, the sonic qualities of this place, and it's a mix. So the Mooney Mooney comes through this particular part over in, it's in sort of Mooney Ponds, Pascoe, kind of heading west from Coburg, where I'm based, here in Naarm. And it's that this overpass, you've got this freeway, there's an overpass, and sounds are being generated by cars hitting certain points in the thick, highway concrete, resonating underneath. So the bike path goes underneath alongside the Mooney Moonies. That's what they've done with a lot of bike paths in Melbourne, obviously, as they run them along the creek lines, because the water lines make the most sense, really, don't they? Yeah. I can actually read from this if I find I've got some, more information around the place itself. Yeah. So this work expands on an environmental recording. I tend to use environmental, not field recording, of an underpass of the Mooney Mooney travelling underneath the City Link. Yes. The Mooney Mooney is part of it's 145 kilometre squared catchment creek that forms on Gunditjmara country, and travelling to meet the Birrarung, which it's the largest tributary, on Wiradjuri country, then out to Nairn, meeting the Warini. And this recording is taken from the sounds of the cars above on the freeway, hitting various points in the concrete. These strikes resonate in the space underneath the underpass where the Mooney Mooney cyclists and walkers pass through. The Mooney Mooney is known as the most abused tributary of the Birrarung in terms of toxicity runoffs. You can see small pipes and interesting coloured whatever, we don't know what, is leaking into this this creek that's being reformed into a concrete channel. Yeah. The creek was converted near Strathmore and funneled into a lifeless concrete channel by engineers to abate erosion in the interest of development. So a lot of work that I do is generally on sort of like in sites that are being developed. It's also really interesting to talk about these ideas of development, value, development, these kinds of things. And that the bottom line is that no matter what, country is always underneath, no matter what capitalism and colonization does above the surface. Yeah. And that's but these toxicities and these runoffs, that's really damaging, and as rivers being so important and they're life-giving, and they have supported people for who even knows how long, it's such a disrespect, but it's such an ignorance around these things. So these engineers are going, no, it's for the interest of the developing the area, and we can't have erosion because we need to build this and this, and or else it's all going to collapse, which it probably wouldn't have done anyway. But it's sort of maybe it was an excuse for an experiment within development, like maybe the sort of European influences of channels. They wanted to do something. I don't know what. It's a really interesting place. Yeah.
And it's an interesting, it seems like such a simple starting point to like look at that whole idea of development in terms of that word, even in terms of Western ways of thinking, you know, to really just kind of take a step back
Yeah.
and think about, well, yeah, how is that part of the cycle of life? What is so central about?
Well, it's an arrogance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Ultimately, it's an arrogance of that white colonial, or just colonial mentalities in general, that their ideas are better than what's here. But it's also a blindness or a lack of vision, you know, metaphorically as well as within your body, listening,
yes,
looking, really, you know, trying without trying, like just not being more open to place, and not just always pushing your agenda onto anything, whatever it might be, regardless if it's a waterway or a forest or a, you know.
Yeah. And we get stuck in that cycle of seeing, you know, of seeing things in a certain way. You know, we think that this is the way to handle erosion, but maybe it's not, you know, maybe it's Actually,
I was having an interesting conversation the other day about, maybe it was with myself, and I think it was with someone else. It was with language and the words that we use over and over again as a society, as a colonial society. It's really, for lack of a less harsh word, it's quite insipid. Like it's quite
it is
sneaky, and there's certain things that we say around, like I should have a list by now in my mind, but I don't. But like, you know, these certain key words that we have, especially when you're talking about people like buying houses and stuff. It's really, and like occupation of place and spaces and value. But these certain little words that people just sneak in, and they're people that are generally really quite open-minded. They're like pretty left. They can even be quite anarchistic in their views and whatever, but just sometimes this language, I think it's a really big deal, and a lot of the language needs to change. For example, why I don't call things field recordings, but I call them environmental. But even that, I need like better language.
Yeah.
And so this work also has issues with language within it, because following, so we've got to this, like there's this place, and there's this cutoff point at Strathmore. So within this work, it's a series of photos. Well, no, it's a sound work, but then I always come from the audio, visual, get my priorities mixed up. But anyway, so the sound was the initial thing, and then from the sound, I responded in some way through the process of recording, but also brought it home again and sat with it and listened to it and left it on, and sort of would listen to this crazy rhythm that these cars are making as they go over, and they're resonating in the space underneath. So resonance for me is a really, as a sound effect, as an effect of sound, is special to me, because it's like a body. It's like a resonant body. So any hollow-bodied instrument, where is it? That way. Any hollow-bodied instrument or anything, it's you know, really, it holds sound within it. So I sort of thought of this place as that.
Anyway. Open presence. I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yeah. And then I went back after listening and took some photos. But sort of trying to remain loose and remain not clarified and not too set in anything, to make it too documentary. But like usually I make video work, and I took some video, it didn't work, and just these held images really seemed to work quite well.
It did.
Yeah. So I think I'm sort of deviating all over the place, so hang on. Like you said, there's a lot to talk about.
We were talking about erosion, and you were sharing some of the work that's been done to kind of rectify in inverted commas, but
converted. So when they've done this at this point in Strathmore, thank you for bringing me back there. In Strathmore, there's this point. It's in the photos. That's how I got there. At this point, from here on, it's just like there's nothing. There's no life. There's no plants. There's a few scrappy things sort of growing where they can along the channeled part. And there's been some replanting since the 70s by those various sort of the new communities, sort of environmental groups. You know how they have Friends of the Moon, like Friends of Creeks and stuff like that. So since the 70s, there's been some Indigenous replanting by colonizer groups, mostly, and that since, so there was this pobblebonk frog. I can't even remember how it happened. Right, it was because I was listening to the sound at home, the dum 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 dum, and somehow came across. Oh, I was researching, sort of looking into what kind of animals there would have been there and what kind of life there would have been there before the concreting of it, and came across one that, and this is the language thing I was mentioning, pobblebonk frog. I'm like, that is the most like twee European colonizer cutie name you could give to an Indigenous animal, and it's just like, oh no. But I've got to listen to this thing, and I went there and listened to the pobblebonk frog, and the only place that had a recording was wildambience.com. So here I'm going, oh no, and I had to buy rights to use the sound or do anything with it. And I'm like, no way, I'm not doing that. Are you serious? And I know that's probably quite rude, but
no,
whatever. And so I downloaded this thing through various means, and for the first run through, and I listened to the sound, and it sounded, the frog donk 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 makes this percussive like rhythm, and it fully is the same as those cars going over the top, and it was eerie. And I was like, okay, well, there's the connection here. There's this strange in between connection of past and present and ongoingness, and these weird overlaps and interactions that people just whiz by. You know, a lot of the time they don't spend a lot of time under this bridge. They pass through and they go, oh, that's cool sound, and keep going, sort of thing. But I spent quite a bit of time under there. So these relationships.
And they call and respond to each other through different notes, the frogs.
That's right. So when there's many of them, they slightly pitch up and pitch down from each other.
Yeah. And
so when I brought overall as a group, they're kind of like an arrangement. They're really beautiful. And there's a few other sites around quite close in here that you can hear them en masse, but there's none. And I was going out with my partner, and we were like, well, and usually in my practice it's like, don't actively seek, but hopefully something will happen or whatever. And she just said, let's go this way today, and we went this other way. I wanted to go the other way. She goes, let's go this way, and we went up to Strathmore to the point where it crosses over, and there was one pobblebonk frog just going on its own. So it's a male frog doing the call, I think, at first, and then I don't actually know what happens in too much detail, but the one frog was there, and it was so like, I know it's sort of naff and anthropomorphizing, but it was quite lonely because there was no other frog. It was just the one at this point. And it was interesting though, because it's literally in the photos, there's the crossover point in Strathmore where it goes from being the alive creek, beautiful rocks, normal, how it should be, cut off point, and it's just nothing. And that's how it is all the way out to the Wairangi now. It's just like goes like that. And this merging, this crossovers in sound and with place and with time. So the pobblebonk, and to find the Indigenous name for this frog is very difficult because so many things have been lost. So what I would like to do during this project somehow is have more involvement with local mob and be able to talk to people somehow. And I would just love to be able, like, I'm working on it. It's very hard as a extremely like bubblified white colonizer to, it's true. It's just really, it's terrible. And it's about our own internal work. And like to get some funding to pay to find the word again, because it's sort of how things go.
Yeah, that's right.
To support ongoing initiatives in that, like, in terms of language, to use these words and to use these things, like how do we have better relationships as well in other ways.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
really important gesture that, yeah, that
Mm.
because language is so much part of our human existence, and
Mm.
there's just no denying the power of actually unearthing and sharing these names. Um, and Eddie, when it came to sort of working with the piece, like the sort of environmental recording as such, you popped that through a synthesizer.
Oh yeah.
How did you go about that in terms of
Well,
using it? And yeah,
I popped it through. I could probably
making it sound
here somewhere. It's okay. Excuse the mess. So this is, oh, it's got a piece missing. This is a Eurorack modular synth. So it's based in many different parts that kind of do a different job, each one. So it's like I ran the audio, the recording through the system in various ways, but mostly it was through a certain delay. And
yeah,
so delay is an effect, an audio effect. And I just love delay. I love it produces so much more out of it from something. It's like it mirrors it, or it responds to it, it augments it, it extends upon it, you know. So when I put the sound through it, the percussion of the cars going overhead, along with the frogs at different points, it was that the original recording stays untouched, so to speak, but it's sort of expanded upon.
yeah,
And it was expanded in the fact that it repeats, but I didn't use, so in the same way that with the cars going overhead, or with how when the frogs are all together they pitch up and they pitch down,
yeah,
it was mainly focused around the cars one. I didn't affect the frogs in the end at all, because you know you don't want to put yourself all over everything in some way, but I wanted to respond in the place that I felt that I was responsible, you know, in terms of overarching capitalism. And so with the delay, it was just pitching it up and down subtly. So the signal comes through, and then the audio rises and falls as it generates other little ding, 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 ding percussive parts. So I suppose by this point, instead of me sort of waving my hands around and describing it, we're probably getting close to playing a bit of it.
I think so. Yeah, definitely. And before you do, like, because I think that idea of process-wise using delay to sort of look at the man-made elements, if you like, call them, there's this lovely mirroring with the frog, like with the whole idea of call and response. And there's a lovely sense of waiting in that space and listening attentively, you know, like that's kind of parallel that I'm feeling between. Yeah, I don't know. It's just to think about the process in that way, just is really, really interesting.
Yeah, no, thank you for saying. Yeah, exactly. Yes. Don't really have much more to say about it.
Let's listen to the work.
I think so. And then sort of talk about it a bit more. I'll see if I can do this part. There we go, the website. Yeah, so it did, the work itself could also end up being just the photos with the ambient sound, but for this particular all extensive purposes video work. So I will be quiet, and the sound will come in shortly.
Yeah, sure.
Let me know if it needs to go up.
Yeah.
Oh no, sorry. Hang on. Hang on. This pauses for a sec. Hang on.
Yeah.
Sorry, I stuffed it up and I think it was over scanning.
No,
it's a shame.
That's fine. I think that gave us a little taste anyway.
Sorry, I realized halfway through. No, I can't stop it. Hang on. One moment. Always happens. Sounds nice anyway.
It really does. It's one of those.
Probably lost it. The window's gone.
Well, it's actually fine in the background. It's actually really beautiful to just sit with, and yeah. It's certainly in this piece, it's like in all your works, Eddie, there's a sense of moving through space, and it's often through nature, but also through spaces that bring nature into an intersection with the man-made. And I think that comes through really clearly and in a really resolved and beautiful way. There's a sense of movement through the work. You know, you've got that passing traffic overhead, as you said, the rushing water, the bike bells, the bird song that goes in and out. So it's like different sounds and different registers that really bring all that to life. But there's just this beautiful feeling of several features really working together to convey that feeling of movement and intersection. Would you reflect a little on that for us a bit more? I know you've sort of, touched on some aspects as we've gone, but maybe on some of the other features of sound that sit within there as a composition.
Those the rings you can hear, the ding 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 ding, that's through the synthesizer. So it's kind of like that way of emotionally relating, for me anyway, emotionally relating to the sounds, the transduction, as a sound artist. It's like, where do you fit in to this thing? You're not just, I don't want to purely just make something that I say is my song and is my story or something. It's like how to involve yourself in your emotional experience of place through the equipment that you might have or the instruments that you might use. Yeah. So here, this photo is that's the crossover point.
Yeah.
Strathmore. Yeah. Sorry, the photos for the first part were cropped off because I had the thing set up wrong. Anyway, but so this is that point, and this is where the pobble bonk, the recording you can hear, is from. So you can see there, it's as it was. It's this and this hits this concrete lip.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So leaving in all those other sounds, like the bikes going past and the people coughing and the things like that, I don't ever also want work to be completely purified or anything. And those, you can hear it there, the synthesized sounds, which kind of now has filled the space or the memory or the echo of the frog.
Definitely.
That has been used previously. So it goes at the start, it's the original recording, and then of the traffic, and then there's the frog, and then a bit more of experience of place and what it's like to be in these places as a colonizer, and as these things that you just trying to pull apart things really, obviously painfully slowly and somewhat embarrassingly slowly. See there, you can see all the little pipes coming in.
Yeah.
Where the runoff will come from gutters or wherever. So all that rubbish that you see on the side of the road, all these things that collect together, they all end up somewhere, Yeah. Even if they're tiny pipes and it's fragments, it's no good. And you can just see how, there's grass on the sides, but grass grows everywhere. There's no, like, the time has been shifted through this place, and it's a drain.
Yeah.
It's a drain. It's been used as a drain, and the Mary is used as a drain, and all these places are used as a drain, and everything that's prioritised are the developments around, and the highways, and the houses, and the apartment blocks, and the sports facilities. I don't know, like.
Yeah. It's fundamentally reshaped the land.
Well, they've reused it, which is almost, no, it's not worse, but it's almost like really gets in there. Like, that was where the water flowed, and they've actually gone in, and how do they even do that? I don't even know. And they've put concrete all the way. They've separated it from the country underneath and around it. They've lifted it. They've lifted the water from the catchment.
That's where the photographic essay really works beautifully with this piece, I think, because you have the sound and it feels very intuitive if you've been in this place, but to visually connect it, to see those runoff points coming in, and it's easy to exist in your everyday and just not think about that. So work like this really, helps to recenter what you're thinking about, I think. But I think I love the sense of movement and walking in all of your works, as in this one, but because I think it feels it feels very instrumental in terms of seeing walking as something that, which you and I have talked about, as something that is deeply connective and engaging. It's part of the human experience, and it's a place where we can think more deeply about our impact and our presence in spaces and places.
Because that is the thing, that everyone's on this trajectory, in this work anyway. It's sort of about trajectories, and the water's on its own course.
It is,
We
yeah.
call it a course, but we're on a, I tend to see us more as on a trajectory, like the cars, the anonymous people in the cars going overhead,
Yeah.
hurtling past, and the cyclists and the people just passing through, you know,
Yeah.
passing, and never like. There's always this sense of going from A to B, as I call it.
Yeah. Yeah.
A to H. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. There's always an end goal in mind.
Yeah.
For sure. And I think when we were talking earlier in our earlier conversation, I was returning to a wonderful quote by Ryuki Sakamoto, where he talks about, he says a wonderful phrase, which is, the world is full of sounds that we don't hear as music, but the sounds are very interesting musically. So I have a strong desire to incorporate them, a sonic blending that is both chaotic and unified. And I think that's just such a beautiful statement to me, that I think this idea of a sonic blending that is both chaotic and unified is just really resonant and conveys so much in terms of how we experience different presences in our world, and also in this work. Like particularly that the merging of the call and response of the pobble bonk and then the sound of the passing cars, they kind of merge and intersect. And sometimes there's other sounds within the work that register as discontinuities or, you know, breaks, or, but then there's that consistent feature that's, you know, all of this conveying this sense of connection or integration of the human with the natural world and with the human made. So sort of, yeah. So that was a very long statement, but
yeah, yeah. It's
but
like,
yeah.
It's the language thing again.
Yeah.
How can we pull apart these things about the separation where, you know, what else can we say instead of human and natural? Like,
yeah, we're part of
what is that about? That in itself is a, like, I just feel like colonizer society or capitalism in general is just, you know, as we know, it's all about division. It's about you stay in your part, and we'll play you off against each other while we're at it, sort of thing. So also in language like that, those divisions and those binaries, it's just like so problematic. If everything could be separated in that way, it's not, because it is about the in-betweens of those clarified, like decisive, who made that a decision anyway, who made that, and who made it the other, and how can, like with I love Ryuichi Sakamoto for that reason. His again, for lack of a better word, his the playfulness that he has, that for me mirrors a lot of like represents a lot of my experience in the experimental noise scene in New Zealand, and just that sort of playing with ideas and remaining open, the agendaless thing, because as soon as you go around telling everything to be like this and be like that, you can't, you lose all the possibilities that were in between.
Yeah, you separate. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So these divisions across language, across gender, across everything, it just has to be diffused. And I think the more that as people with voices that we can change language or say things outright, you know, stop being so because there's this politeness that is crippling. It's really like, it really holds things in a certain place that it's frozen in a way, you know, and people have all these intentions and all these, you know, and people know that things need to change, but they can't, nothing can happen unless we really start pushing ourselves and maybe saying, you know, I feel weird a lot of the time saying things like, it's actually quite difficult to say. So me as colonizer, us as colonizer, because people don't say it as much as I think that they should, because there's a lot of like, it's complex. It's really complex, because also it means other things to other people. But I do feel like you have to speak from your own perspective as much as you can as well.
Yeah, you do. You have
whatever that is. Yeah.
Start from a position of self-awareness and try and.
Well, that's where your experience is. You know, that's where you're useful.
Yeah.
You're no good talking for someone else.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So language is just like, yeah, and because that's another colonizer thing to talk about. Yeah, it's a long process. But yeah, so in terms of in between spaces that I'm attracted to and the crossovers of sound, but they're everywhere because they're in your house and they happen all the time. Like I think you showed another work of mine, what's it called again? This is my brain. My brain is just like that. The material thing is vibrating into the emptiness. Yeah. These long-winded titles always get me.
No, it's a good title. I like the title.
Yeah.
But I think just picking up on Sakamoto and like the whole idea of sonic blending, and I think there's, you know, so much in the Western way of thinking is oppositional in understanding, whereas within Eastern philosophy, there's space for contradiction and the play of opposites, you know, like just part of the way that Eastern philosophical thinking works. You know, it's kind of and there's so much, I think, about coming from that position of greater self-awareness also comes from, you know, educating yourself about different philosophies and ways of thinking. And
it's sorry.
No, continue.
It's unfortunate that we as like the Anglo, I'm sorry, I don't know your background specifically, but myself and my Anglo background is that or European background is that the disconnection from place is a really big deal. It's really which does afford room for things like, you know, capitalism and colonization to really take hold completely, because you know, at some point I'm sure we had quite good systems of relating to nature, you know, and without the divisions and without things, and yes, other cultures which luckily we're able to live amongst and speak to people and learn from other artists and things, other cultures we can you know, connect with and relate to across, like, which is great. But it's like, yeah, at what point did we, how can we also rebuild our own, like from the ground up, build these connections while all coming together in some way to relate across sound. And I just think that the pairing of sound and vision for me is really important, mainly I guess just because of the sensory, like because I have a sort of an excruciating eye for detail, or it's like my awareness is just pretty, like, it's kind of sometimes a bit too much, which is why it's difficult to live in the city for me sometimes. It's just that I think that audiovisual really like brings things together for me and puts me as an artist puts me sensorially I'm engaged. It engages my thinking a bit more, and then but also removing the image temporarily is also something I've been playing with a bit at the moment as well, and some other works like here. This is on my website, the Tikoka and a turnip field. This one here, hang on, let's get the thumbnail in the right place. This one, that's another one that's quite similar to Mooney and its methodology, but the synthesis and the place, but that's in Aotearoa down in Te Waipounamu, so down south. That's where I'm from, you know, so I'm speaking from places that from and I grew up in a rural background. I come from a colonial farming family, so I'm like 6th generation land stealer, and it's really these places that, that's a work I'd really like to talk about sometime. I'm not sure if maybe now's the right moment, because you didn't just briefly maybe.
Definitely. I'd love to expand on it, Eddie, by all means, because it was something that we touched on briefly. Well, I touched on briefly in my questions from the last chat, but I didn't sort of delve deeper. It's a beautiful work, and it's
jumping around.
I think you definitely jump into it, but one of the things I was wanting to say too about your sound work is that I don't know, it feels like a safe space sound, you know, like with so much heightened stress and triggers in our sort of modern day world. You know, like I think sound is a way of really understanding ourselves and our relationship with place in a way that we can come at it from different ways in a more comforting space. I'm not expressing myself particularly well at the point.
I know what you mean.
But I think it kind of comes from, I'll give you an example. When we came out of lockdown, you know, I felt quite strange. I don't know about you, but going out into public spaces and sort of getting out. I mean, I'd done my work walking every day and stuff, and you know that was fine. But I must admit, one of the things I haven't had a chance to tell you was I spent a lot of time listening to Slippage, because I found somehow it made me feel safe and comfortable to get out and walk and just be present and be in those spaces, and not, just kind of, it felt like a lovely re-entry point back into sort of normalized living.
Slippage, I'll bring that up. That's on my SoundCloud here. So yes, slippage is we talked about this in the interview that we did, and slippage is something's playing. Hang on, I can let it play maybe underneath. I'll see if I can manage the volume. If not, I'll just turn it off. Slippage is an interesting one, because that is like, you know, I was talking before about merging the external, makes me with my binaries again, external, internal, the external sound and the internal experience. But there's somewhere in between that where it's like, say if this is going to get a little, excuse me, but like it's like a space between maybe here and the center of your head. I don't know, like the space that's in here. So it goes in a bit.
Yeah.
But also an awareness here. There's something about it, about like energy and perception and perspective, where like with the sounds like this, none of this is specifically anything from the external. I'll bring it up a little. So this one was it's to do with so it's a melody, it's a series of notes put through, it's a series of signals, like it's called MIDI. Signals coming into the synthesizer, and the synthesizer is expanding upon it in its own way, but I'm controlling the variables, so I'm controlling certain elements within that big thing, that I showed you before. And but yeah, I think that in our lives we have an internal, if you're in any way musical or not, even if you're not, usually you have these sort of internal melodies or internal like what's the word, these internal sounds, and maybe you don't know them but you hear them over time. And I think that I've heard a lot of them through the places that I have been and the way that I grew up and the things that I am more aware of now, thanks to my like being in those experimental noise scenes and literally being taught how to listen deeper through extensively long, painful, minimal and or hectically noisy performances, you know, learning about what is a sound and what is the value in sound. You know, to me, I can't listen to mainstream radio that much. I can't listen to anything. It's too overt, it's too commercialized, it's commodified in a way. But from it, not to say, you know, sorry, but you know what I mean? Like, but I'm just more drawn to those melodies that can be produced from, they're relatable in a more bodily way, that conscious kind of way. So that's why the synthesizer is great, because it produces these sort of sounds that, it's also quite organic in how it produces sound. So different parts of the machine relate to others, and they trigger each other, and they relate, and they beat against each other, and they modulate and do all these things. So that's exactly what's happening in this one, is that you have a set structure, and then you expand upon it, and it sort of comes apart. So in terms of consciousness and you walking with something like this, it's a really big compliment. Thank you that you spent time with it, because it's in this one anyway, it's textures and notes and melodies that, you know, there's emotion to it, and there's like a familiarity. And I know what you mean about a comfort, but maybe that comfort is already you.
It's a sound within sound, I think it brings out for me, like which I find in all your work.
A listener, though.
Yeah, it's amazing. No, but it does. It comes from deep within, and it's because it heightens your awareness to sounds and different sound shapes and different,
That's very flattering. Yeah.
No, it's brilliant, Eddie, because
Yeah.
I know the other compliment I've been meaning to pass on is because I went in actually recently. I had to have some tests, some medical tests, and I went in for an MRI. I've never had that before, and I'm quite claustrophobic. And before I went in, I'd been listening to your work again, and I got in there, and I don't know if you've ever had one of those things, but it's the loudest thing in the world. It's just machine noises, bam, 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 like really all around you, and you're in this tiny space. And the way that I got through it was listening to the machine sounds within the sounds, and the musicality
Yes.
sounds, and that's literally how I got through it.
It's so great. That's because you spent so much time. Thank you.
So much time listening, because I think it's really helped me. I think that's the power of art. I mean,
yeah,
it's really, really
sometimes
beautiful.
you definitely do wonder why you do these things or whatever. But I think generally it is just that you can't not do anything else, and maybe you don't think you do enough, or your work isn't as strong as it could be or something. But I think that anything that anyone does ever is something.
Yeah. Your work's doing a lot more than that. I mean, I think it's incredible.
So this so Slippage it sort of became a collection. It wasn't supposed to be. So Slippage was the one thing that you're referring to here, which is like 17 minutes long. So a lot of my tracks are long as well. So if anyone wants to have a listen, just put it on in the background and
definitely
do something, or do something else with your hands, or put it on in headphones and on the train is nice.
Yeah.
Well, especially if you go under, like if you go through Macaulay Station, that's one of my favourite stations to go through and listen to other people's work. But yeah, so here there's also some other ones. So Slow Demolition and 2000 Windows, Shapeshifter and Sleepwalk. They're all, I just realised they all sort of start with S except for 2000 Windows. I should change that. The Slow Demolition is like response to a lot of development around here and just the treatment of country, of soil.
Yeah.
And it's just so intense, and they bring in all this stuff and they just make layers of stuff, and it's so noisy and brightening. So some of this was recordings from some of that. So it was in response to this machine that's hitting concrete and dragging its metallic parts across it, and it makes this resonant scraping sound. So that was a responsive one. I quite often get a lot of inspiration from recordings from things, and they're not the prettiest sounds, like what you're saying with the MRI. They're quite horrible sounds, but you almost, within that one, you almost like, I'll just swap over to it. It's pretty emotional, this one. It's pretty like, I really felt for the machine. It was almost like the materials that made the machine were battling against the materials that it was like, the concrete's, it's just so silly. This is what my brain does. Like concrete is comprised of an amalgam that comes from places everything comes from places, and there's this human inside the machine driving the machine against the earth, and I just felt really, it's just so intense. Like, we are just the worst. We're just unstoppable. And throughout lockdown as well, they sort of continued a lot of the time, even just with one person. No matter what we do, we must continue. We must keep, like, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, it really is.
Unstoppable thing.
Yeah.
So this one, there's sort of I'll skip through a bit. I'll turn up a little bit. So it's really like some of this building kind of slow thing, but towards the end here, another long form.
Yeah.
Is it comes up soon.
Yeah, it's beautiful tensions in the work. It's just brilliant, Eddie. It's just brilliant.
So you can hear coming in.
Yeah.
So the digger thing.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
It makes a note.
it does.
Grapes. There's a particular point. Sorry. But that was made with the machine made that so I use that as the keynote throughout the piece.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Get really excited.
No, it's extraordinary because that's what I was tapping into when I was in the MRI, you know, those sorts of sounds, you know, like it, and sounds within sounds. And yeah, no, it was really amazing.
Yeah.
And you wanted to turn to,
yeah, we could do that lastly and then we could wind.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you maybe before we finish on that one, like now that we're coming out of lockdown, and we're returning to kind of some of the old everyday habits and patterns of private life, but also public life. Are you hopeful about retaining that sort of sense of enhanced noticing that you saw or you observed in people during lockdown when they were, you know, out and about walking and things? Are you seeing a shift now when you go out with people? Are you hopeful about kind of retaining that? And
I'm hopeful, but yeah, not to be too pessimistic. I'll try not to be. Is that I think that it's very easy for us to get sucked back into how things were before, even though we know that we don't want it.
Yeah, yeah.
Like no matter, it's such an unstoppable force that it's like, yeah, it's a shame in a way because there's so much power in that. And I remember the excitement that was happening in my community anyway around like, oh, there's possibilities for the entire dismantling of capitalism and we're all going to work differently and we're going to be listened to and it's going to be whatever. And there'd be, you know, opportunities for different ways of operating, especially within the arts as well.
Yeah.
Not always being confined to galleries and bending over backwards for gallery requirements and you know, going along with those requirements and those structures as much. That's a really big conversation. And I just feel like everyone, yeah, in terms of, like you said, the domestic space, but also creative space and mental space and going back to work and what this means. And I think that the best thing, I don't know, I hope that people can continue to practice these things. But I do notice, you know, when I'm driving, I hate driving in Melbourne, outwards fine, inwards bad. People, they have no patience, nothing. It's like the 8 months never happened. They're just desperately wanting to not wear masks anymore and get back to it, you know. And it's like, back to what? Like,
yeah.
But I'm sure there are a lot of people that I always get overpowered by the majority a lot of the time, which is unfortunate. But it's that I do know that a lot of people are trying to maintain good practices that they might have developed or awarenesses that they opened up, because I think that 7 to 8 months was a pretty good amount of time to form better habits. Like I definitely have, but I still get stressed out. I have terrible anxiety issues with living in a city in general, and just people and how they treat each other and how they treat place and how we're all part of it and we're all equally responsible. But I do feel that some really make an effort to be more aggressive than others. But it's it's hard to maintain that, because then it takes an energy, whereas before, because everyone was under lockdown, you didn't have to try too hard. But maybe that was a really good time to build up that strength to then be able to continue that at least for a while. And I do think that globally things are changing towards and here I'm being maybe foolishly optimistic as well, is that I do feel like things are changing in terms of like mainly Indigenous voices within capitalist structures, which I think is something I'm just voicing, and definitely it's a very malformed idea, but I feel like there's a power that is possible, and also then with support and giving room to voices and giving room to people, but still, because it has to stay within the structure, unfortunately, it just has to, because you can't go from one extreme to the other. You know, it doesn't work. That's how they catch you.
Yeah.
Is that because you try to jump and you can't jump. You've got to painfully step through. You know, like, for example, in Aotearoa with Jacinda, she's not the greatest thing, to be honest, for a lot of people. It's great that she's there, because the alternative is terrible. No more old white men, please. And these are people, but, you know, everyone has their agendas and things that they're whatever, and perspectives, and I do think that there's very small steps, and at least if there's hope for people, then they will at least we can things can maybe continue to that utopian little dream that I had at the start of lockdown. I was like, yes, it's all going to come collapsing down. It's going to be great.
Yeah.
It's going to be horribly messy. I shouldn't, like, that's coming from my extremely comfortable position, and obviously the impact of those things would be horrific for a long time, and that's the only way with dismantling such an abusive and exploitative system. But anyway, that was a bit of a rant.
No. I think that's right. I mean, lockdown's been very hard on many families from all different backgrounds, but I think the positive point has been that in that experience we've become more collective in our outlook, hopefully, and that we hope
that's something.
That we hold on to that, because it's quite dear, I think, in our very individualistic society, and even within the arts, you know, like even within industries, you know, this whole kind of idea of cooperate, collaborate, work together, you know.
Yeah, but it's urgent, though, you know. It's not just urgent. It has to happen. It has to happen.
Yeah, it really does. And of course, we're changing we've changed how we've created art, but also we've changed, you know, pretty fundamentally how we disseminate and consume art. I mean, that's going to continue to change over the coming months. But I think what I loved about this project with you particularly was, you know, the way that we decided to present Mooney Mooney, you know, with this kind of flexibility in the perceptual process. Like, really, okay, you can listen to it, that's one thing. You can look at it in connection with image, that's another thing. And then finally, you can look at it as a more integrative AV work. And so I think giving people those options and really, you know, emphasising the power of sound and, you know, what that can uncover for us in our everyday, really, really central and beautiful for this moment in time. So it's been such a pleasure working on it.
Thank you for the opportunity to do it, because you know, I always work to, well, previously actually through lockdown I got much better. I always just work to like what's required. Like, someone asks me to do something, then I'll do something. I not usually have this sort of ongoing rolling practice. I do have little ideas and all these fragments scattered everywhere, but actually throughout lockdown I got much better at focusing on one thing, because I wasn't being pulled, my mental space wasn't being pulled towards my day job, pulled towards this and that, because I do find my day/night job very stressful. It's quite stressful, especially under COVID stuff. It was stressful, just a whole other added level of stuff. So I work as a videographer at the Arts Centre and as a technician, and it's not relaxing. It's great work though, because a lot of the shows that we do are great, but it's just like having that mental space regardless was so productive and considered, and I felt really good. I guess I felt like myself. I was like, oh. So I'd love to just be paid to just do this all the time, but unfortunately that's not the case. But a way to keep space for that, you have to be really like just tell productivity and commodification of your skills to just go over there, and you're just going to focus on letting your mind wander and your senses open, and still go for those walks, and still still listen to things. And I love listening to artist talks in general. I know this one's probably been quite rambly and lots of arm waving, and I get really excited and come down, things crash, but I like that about I like watching artist talks, and I think this time also has been really good for people getting online and making these sort of these documents.
Definitely.
So thank you for all this whole process. It's really great. It's been really great. It really made me reflect on a lot of stuff.
I'm glad, Eddie.
Yeah.
Is that a nice point to finish, or do you think we should?
I think so.
Yeah.
Shall I play a work and then you can just sort of end it, or
that would be beautiful.
What should I play the material thing, because it's a bit more like.
That would be beautiful, actually.
But just Te Koka and Turnip Field is also very important to me from my background and things. So if anyone's interested, it's there on my my website. It's disrhythms.net. So
yes, and anyone that hasn't yet been to the virtual site for the show, please do jump and have a read, because there's some beautiful conversation there with Eddie about the material thing is vibrating into the emptiness, which is the work we're going to play now, which is one of my favorites without a doubt. It's just if we can play favorites, but it's just beautiful. So go in and have a look and read Eddie's words, because she's really they're just marvelous. It's just been a great conversation and process talking with her, and you can find all her details in there too, as far as her website contact and so on. And Eddie, the other thing we should tell folks is also just the beautiful release that you've just made as well.
Yes. So through, I'm logged in, so it doesn't look as. So through Music Company picked me up through a friend. They do some great releases here. Music Company has a Bandcamp. Doesn't actually have the Bandcamp link, but it's store.musiccompany.co. They're from Melbourne, and they put out some great artists in terms of a bit more experimental, looser things. So they have just put this out. Excuse some of the behind the scenes buttons, that's not usually there. And this work, this artwork, can I bring it up? This artwork's by my friend from Otipoti, Dunedin in Aotearoa, New Zealand, Motoko Kikawa. She's a visual artist. She does a lot of different things, sculpture and otherwise. These blocks here are not her work. They are the relationship with the label. So she did this expansive, huge thing. A something two. Two drawing, and it's with this has been, I've converted this to grayscale, but it's all in biro, and her work is incredible. It's really expansive, and it just goes and goes and goes. And so they're sort of somethings, and they shift, they shape shift. So each track throughout this release has a different crop because of the size of the work, and for sharing it online and on these platforms, each track has a different crop of the overall image that I felt related sonically. So Motoko made this drawing actually in response to maybe one track from this album, but actually from Slippage. She was listening to Slippage and drawing and finishing this work. And so that relationship between, because Slippage is really closely related to this. It was at the same time, but this album is a selection. It's actually an EP apparently. I'm calling it an album. Sorry, got lost. Getting tired now, so much talking. So these 5 tracks, the overall expansive work, it comes down each one sonically. So then it's like this collaboration of me making the work, Motoko listening, and then me sort of rearranging things again and for sharing. So she has an Instagram, Motoko Kikawa, 2 Ks in the middle of Kikawa.
When we finish up, we'll share a little update from just now and provide all the details of this latest release for Eddie. And
so Looking for Glass, eves.bandcamp.com is the release. And this one, this release, it started from a field recording of from the first space where I lived in. Sorry, it won't take long. The first space that I lived in New Zealand, it was this experimental noise art space where we lived and had shows, and this basement. and it closed recently, and I went back for a party, and I recorded this field recording at the start, looking for glass, and the pitch black. I'm in a basement, and I've got my recorder and walking around, and it's just this, I'm underneath everything and in the space where I lived for so long and had made so much work and had really formed as a human being. And Motoko had lived there as well. That's how we became friends. So that was the title of it, and kind of the overall concept. It sort of bookends the entire release, sort of. I can't control the volume of this on this one, so it's going to get a bit loud. The entire work sort of goes across place in Aotearoa and here in so-called Australia. So yeah, it's just like I have been busy.
You've been busy, Eddie. You've been really busy.
And this is why lockdown's been great.
It's good. It's really, really good. So do go and spend some time with The Material Thing is Vibrating into the Emptiness, because it's really gorgeous, and the new album, Looking for Glass. And we'll have the live stream recording online, and eventually we'll have a lovely transcript that we'll share there too. And also we'll keep working towards part 2 and keep you all informed in terms of how that's progressing. But our hope is to have a beautiful book that will publish 3 new works by our visual artists, and also the written word of the wonderful Julie Coe. But yeah, we'll keep you posted with how we go with funding on that end. In the meantime, we have this beautiful part 1 to return to, and it's the type of space that you can just keep going back to. So please do, everyone, and thank you for joining us in the virtual world out there. Now I'm waving hands. Thanks, Eddie.
Thank you.
We'll talk soon.
Yes, thanks.
Bye for now.
Bye.